Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Vi and Corgo Talk About Mucor. I'm going to put my cards on the table first and foremost for our discussion of Kid A, the fourth Radiohead album released in the year 2000. And say that Kid A is my second favorite album of all time. I am incredibly personally attached to this album. It was one of the albums that really got me into music, and so if I gush or go on a tangent about how much I love a song, that is why.
That's fine. Makes it more interesting, honestly.
The diametric opposite is my co-host here. I believe this is your first time hearing it, right?
Yep, I have not heard a single track.
Okay. What are your first thoughts?
First thoughts. This is, I think you said, was this the one that you said was going to be more like electro, or was it a different one? I think you were talking about King of Limb.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I might have, but this is more electronic.
I did not expect this to be so depressing. Like, I expected it to be a lot more upbeat, but basically, other than like Optimistic and Idioteque, there was like only trace amounts of like anything, I guess, happy.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say even those tracks are kind of sarcastic and like
Sarcastic?
the deadpan, I guess. Like I would say the title of Optimistic is very misleading, would be my statement. But if you think they are like more upbeat, that is fair. So yeah, that's a fair analysis of it, honestly. I guess we can talk about what's led to this album's creation. That might shed a light on why it is like that. Radiohead, one of my favorite bands, have a very interesting story. Do you know any of it, or like?
No, don't think.
So they formed in Oxford in the late 80s, and one of the first like official songs that they actually released, so like not a demo, was "Creep." To date, their most popular song, and that went off like crazy before they even had an album out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and generally when that happens, you become a one-hit wonder. And after their first album, Pablo Honey, did poorly, everybody's opinion was cemented as, you know, Radiohead are a one-hit wonder. They are not a serious band. You don't need to like take them seriously. Then their next album, The Bends, did very well in the UK. They became more respected, but they still had like no success in America until their 1997 album OK Computer, to date regarded as one of the best albums of the 90s, and by extension one of the best albums of all time. It took an album like that to really expose them to public consciousness, and with a few pretty big singles in the US, they were not going back. But with fame comes a price. Tom York, the frontman of Radiohead, didn't like the exposure that album gave him. He felt very like trapped in the public limelight. He also wasn't really a fan of like rock music as a concept, as like, you know, the big stereotype of like rock stars flashing cash and with babes on stage, and Tom hated that. He didn't want that. So he became kind of depressed. He stripped back. He spent a lot of time in his home just playing his piano. And that's where a lot of these songs come from, is from that purposefully different approach to the sound.
And so just like the entire album is just kind of based on like how he felt, or maybe just like most of it. I don't know about all of it, but like
right.
A lot of the feel comes from what he was going through after that whole big public exposure.
Yeah, he didn't like that. He expressed that, along with the growing fears of sort of the world as a whole. There is a theory, a kind of unsubstantiated theory, in my opinion, that this album is sort of a concept album about the world's first human clone, hence the name Kid A, you know?
Yeah,
but
unsubstantiated.
In my opinion, yeah, there isn't a whole lot to back that up. It's an interesting idea, and there are some songs that sort of reflect that very depressing concept of like humans no longer being necessary, but it's not really there. In my opinion, the feel of that concept, the depressing reality of that is still felt in this album, which, as you said, is very sad.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's not really trying to be anything else. It is unabashedly itself. And it is kind of beautiful, in my opinion. That starts from the very first second of this album. The very first second. Not the first track, not the first lyric. That first moment on everything in its right place. You get a short little descending arpeggio into a long tone. Is beautiful. I love it. It perfectly sets the tone in, like I said, a second. Not even that moment has been described as Radiohead introducing you to the 21st century. As I said, this album came out in the year 2000, so it's like exposing you to this harsh new reality, which has been sort of explored on that track. All of the lyrics on this album are very abstract.
Yeah, like
so it's hard to really, so it's hard to really glean any. But of what we have with this track, it is very stark and like cold. Certainly, the electronic tone on this track was, I believe, barely modified from one of the presets on his Casio keyboard, but it works so well. Despite that, it feels cold and robotic, off-putting. It's like you're looking at this distant alien world and you don't recognize anything.
Yeah, for me, when I first listened to it, I thought it was kind of weird as an opening. But like once I had gone through the rest of the album and like now listening back on it, like you're right. This definitely kind of sets the mood for the entire album, honestly.
Yeah, it starts as it continues, and the track title, as well as one of the only lyrics, is once again kind of sarcastic, I feel, or like ironic almost. Like you have this world where everything is in its right place and nothing ever changes because it's all perfect. It's almost like sad in that perfection, if that makes sense.
Like nothing else to do because it's just everything's been done.
To the point where he wakes up, is sucking on a lemon just to feel something else. That is my interpretation of that line, but it could mean a million things, because...
Yeah.
But this track, and its sparse yet somehow dense electronic soundscapes are wonderful, and a really great start. It really puts you into the mind of Tom at this point.
Yeah, I would say, I think you touched on this briefly, but the atmosphere of it is like really good. With like those, it's like a distorted whisper, I want to say.
Oh yeah, you get those reverse sounds of like Tom saying words in very short snippets of human voice. It feels like you're in the middle of this conversation, but you don't understand anything.
Yeah, it makes you feel like surrounded, is what I was feeling. Yeah. It's very uncomfortable, but like not in like a bad way. Like that's like setting the mood.
Right. And this track builds and decays at certain points, giving you a nice variety of feeling, yet never straying too far from its stated purpose. Till eventually it decays one last time into our next track, the title track, Kid A.
Kid A.
Which is a very interesting one. This one took a long time to grow on me. Like, I have it rated as a 10 out of 10, but it took like months of hearing the song to really cement that. Additionally, one thing that it did that for me was a cover by John Mayer, if you know him. He did a fairly straightforward guitar cover of this track, and it really brings out the vocals and the tones, which are all kind of obscured by the effect Tom had on his vocals and sort of subdued backing. That cover really brought it out to me and just exposed how great it all is. What do you think of it?
So I thought it was kind of interesting how it kind of, at least at the start, it kind of continued on with that like awkward atmosphere that everything in its right place gives, but in like a different tone. I don't know. That's not a good way to put it, but that's how I'm putting it. And then
that's good.
Right.
I get what you mean. Don't put yourself down. Only I can do that.
God. Okay. Anyways, Then it kind of, I felt like it paces into much more like, at least the instrumental, it's kind of like comforting almost. But
Yeah.
then there's those lyrics which then like combat that, and they're like much more depressing than the actual like instrumental.
I don't know about depressing, but they are very, once again, cold.
Well, the vocals themselves, I feel like, are pretty depressing.
One of the main facets of the sort of clone theory of this album is this track. It has been interpreted as like the first moments of birth, and it kind of feels like that to me, at least in the atmosphere. Because it opens with this like a childish melody in a like very distorted piano. It goes up and down, softly, sweetly, and then you get the bass in, which is like a thumping and sort of reiterating its point of like, this is life now. And then you have your vocals, which are pretty hard to understand and pretty obscured.
Yeah.
The fun fact, these vocals were picked randomly from a hat. So
What?
or these lyrics.
Wait, like
were
literally?
picked randomly from a hat. Yeah. But in my opinion, as someone who enjoys like randomness in art, that only makes them more impactful. It's not just a random. Yes, it is just a random collection of words, but it's not. It's more than that.
I wouldn't agree on that. Because then it feels like the
Okay.
interpretation is just more of like nothingness. Like there isn't really anything behind it. You can still attempt to make meaning out of it, which I will agree is pretty interesting. But I feel like in the long run, that kind of denies all meaning from the track itself.
I would disagree. I feel like I am a fan of like modern art, and I get that most people aren't. But I do legitimately feel like you get what you bring to it, you know? You get out of it what you put into it. It's seen more in this track than anything else. Like, would these lyrics be more meaningful if they were consciously written in a certain order? I don't think so. If you do, that's okay. I'm just saying that it's like, that is my interpretation of it. Yeah. One line that always sticks out to me, which I think has a wonderful melody, is standing in the shadows at the end of my bed. She says a few times, sort of, once again, reiterating that, which is like a reference to sleep paralysis. So you have that like the dark theme mixed with a superficially positive instrumental, making it feel rather sinister.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say with like the more, I guess you put it in a pretty good way, the more like playful melody that plays, whereas with the lyrics it's more like, well, I don't know, sinister is a good way to put it, I feel like.
The ending theme, the rats and the children follow me out of town, is a reference to the Pied Piper. You have that like, once again, a negative things happening of like leading the children somewhere else, mixed with the childlike instrumental. It gives it a weird kind of feeling that I really enjoy. That has a certain physicality to it, if that makes sense.
Alright.
This is a harsh transition into our next track. This next track is one of my favorites, the National Anthem. What do you think of it?
It is. Whereas I feel like most of the rest of this album is kind of like depressing, I feel like this one comes off as mean.
That's a good word for it.
With like that guitar is just like
constantly pounding away, yeah.
It's just like rude, I guess.
Yeah. I honestly wouldn't have approached it that way. But that's a good term for it. It's like mean. This is the most abrasive track on the album by a pretty wide margin.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
This is where it gets pretty experimental. And that pounding bass, they're blurting out the same melody over and over and over, ties the whole track together. It makes it all, he gives it all a bass line that you can add things onto. And this is kind of reflective of the same themes in the first two tracks. with lyrics that don't come in for a few minutes. When they do, it says, everyone around here, everyone is so near, so alone. So even though we are together, we're all isolated. And with the title of the track, you could interpret this as a political statement. But I don't really feel that way.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, why do you think it's called the National Anthem? Because
Tom wants this to be the British national anthem. I don't know. I can give you a few ideas.
Psycho.
It's saying in this modern life, we're all isolated from each other by the crushing tide of nationalism. That is one interpretation. But in my opinion, it's less specific than that. Like, that's a pretty direct interpretation of its ideals. Whereas, in my opinion, you have to read more broadly. But yeah, Tom's vocals are just excellent on this track. As the jazz instrumentation continually progresses, gets louder, gets more layered of sound, they play more harshly, more dissonantly, gets more and more intense and in your face. Tom's vocals reflect that. He just starts screaming at the top of his lungs. And his final line, "It's holding on," is right before another layer of like brass comes in and just blows you away. It is a lot to handle, but if you can, it's really there.
Yeah, honestly, very good track.
I'm glad you enjoy it. I wasn't sure how you would feel about this one. But yeah, the National Anthem. I like the tuba, the solo that happens here. You get.
Is that a tuba?
There is one at one point, but that's all I can tell you. I'm not an expert on identifying instruments by their sound, but it's a very low brass. And it has its own idea. It sort of bounces around, and it ends swiftly. This track has been described as a marching band walking into a brick wall, and that's pretty accurate to its sound.
I don't see how it's a brick wall, but I can definitely see the marching band part. That's a really good way to put it.
Because it just builds and builds, and you feel suffocated, overwhelmed by the sound, which makes it a really excellent shift in the album's ideals from sad and depressed to like angry at
evil,
at
maybe
the state of the world.
It feels like evil and dark, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, evil is once again a good word for it. This is an evil track, and it just goes and goes and goes until it all falls apart at the end, and we get some really weird orchestral, really short idea that I quite enjoy actually. It's just like plays for just a bit.
Are you talking about like the classical piece at the end?
Yeah, at the very end, which sounds like you're hearing it from a different room. And
yeah, it's like very distant.
Perhaps distant is exactly the word to use, and it's showing how this modern life makes us more distant from each other. That's kind of pretentious, but
I mean, that's fine. It's music. Make of it what you want.
Yeah, that's a good idea for it. A National Anthem, one of my favorites. Really, really imposing and just powerful. And then we go on to a fan favorite, usually regarded as the status track, "How to Disappear Completely." What do you think of it?
It was, very, very sad. It felt like, at least personally, it felt like I was like floating through space. Like I'm just floating. I'm just there. There's just nothing I can do about it, and I'm just in space.
Yeah, it feels like you're a ghost. Right there with the lyrics. As someone who has struggled with mental illness, no track comes quite as close to describing what it feels like to be depressed, to be so out of it that you can't even do anything, than this track. Like, that's not me. I go where I please. I walk through walls. It's just like, I am a ghost and nothing can affect me. This track's idea came from a conversation Tom had with his then wife, where he was talking about concerts and how it feels to just be up there in front of thousands of people. And he was like, I can't handle it. I'm having a panic attack. I can't do this. And his wife just said, just say, I'm not here. This isn't happening. Which was directly quoted for the chorus. But this is probably a more conventionally structured song.
I also wanted to say, what is it? The title is based off of that one book, right? About like how to legitimately remove yourself from society altogether,
right?
And have no trace.
Yeah, which is the kind of what Tom wanted to do, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, it is sort of what he did. If you said all he did was just stay in his house all day and just play the piano, he definitely at least somewhat did it. Not completely, but...
I have my hand on my chin. That's an interesting interpretation of it. But yeah, this is just a really beautiful track of wanting to be anywhere else and not being able to, of truly above anything else, denial. Tom is in denial and he wants out but he can't get it. Just so he has to lie to himself.
Yeah, very good track.
This is one of the more orchestral ones, and it's very moving. I liked what you said about you felt like you were floating, because that is pretty close to the intention, I would imagine.
It definitely portrays its mood,
right.
Everything about it, just the title, the vocals, the instrumental,
the lyrics,
yeah.
Nothing brings me closer to what this album wanted than that final delivery of I'm not here, but this isn't happening. Tom soars near the end and it's just so wonderful. I want to give a shout out to a little MIDI trumpet that comes in for just 10 seconds right in the middle. It always gives me the strongest of emotions to deal with. It's just so beautiful.
You really know this album. If you can call out a trumpet that plays for 10 seconds.
This is my second most streamed album ever. Because I listened to. There's only one track I don't listen to that often, and I'll get into why. But it's a very personal reason. How to Disappear Completely, really, really great track.
Yeah.
It is just everything I want in a song. And when I'm feeling down in the dumps, nothing is more comforting than this. So after these two very emotional pieces, even if they are kind of the opposite emotions, that being hatred and evil, and then depressive sadness, we get a little ambient piece called Treefingers. What do you think of it? What do you think of this little rest stop before the album continues?
Beautiful. I loved it.
I agree.
Was the second I started hearing it, I'm like, this is an instrumental. I don't know how to put it, just in the first 5 seconds, I was like, this is an instrumental. And it's a great one. I feel like I could fall asleep to it, honestly. It is just so relaxing. It is just this break. After all, it's just this depressing, just dark everything. You just get this 3 to 4 minutes of just peace and quiet.
That's a good interpretation of it. Another fun fact: this track was actually made from guitars.
What?
Very, very slowed down guitars played back over each other, but I know it's hard to believe, but Tom got a lot of raw emotion out of those instruments.
Damn.
I know. People are always shocked, but
Whenever I listen to this, I just think of just like fish swimming through an aquarium. Like,
I can see that. Like that. Once again, that's the sort of peace.
yeah,
Like,
it's just like calm. Just nothing's happening. Great ambient piece.
that is true. It's not a very progressive track. Like, there's not really any like sections. It has one idea and it like lives in it, but it doesn't need to. It does exactly what it is meant to do, and what it was meant to do is wonderful. So I have like no complaints.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of ambient. I'm not gonna lie, Stars of the Lid may or may not have made me cry.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That was
Refinement or Decline, that hit me.
that's fair. I like to put ambient on in the background mostly. It's like really good. It's working music.
Mm-hmm.
But Treefingers I always like intently listen to because it has that depth for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love it.
Is it like your favorite track or what?
Honestly, maybe.
Wow, it's surprising, because it's kind of an interlude. But like you said, it's a break between these sections, and I can see how it could do that for you. I'm glad you like this one too. It's really great. After the Treefingers, after that break, we get Optimistic, which is the most
Optimistic.
standard. Sure, but what I mean is if you were a fan of Radiohead in the year 2000s, you saw this album in the shop, bought it, put it in your car on the ride home, this would be the track you would most identify with, because it's the most Radiohead-like up to that point. This could have been a track on OK Computer, and I think so. And nothing else could have. That is my point. If you don't think so, that's fair. But like,
I think out of all of them, definitely this would have been, if one of these had to go on OK Computer, I agree with you. This probably would have been the best one to go on it.
okay. Optimistic is basically a rock track. It is, in my opinion, not a very happy song. It's a pretty stark portrayal of what drives people apart, that being, most importantly, money. As seen in the opening verse, which I love a lot. It's gonna read in full. Flies are buzzing round my head, vultures circling the dead. This is my favorite line in this track, and perhaps in the whole album. The big fish eat the little ones. The big fish eat the little ones. Not my problem to give me some. That's not a very happy portrayal of Corgo.
Well, what do you think it means?
It's showing how people will pick you for everything you're worth before tossing you aside. The chorus is very different, and that contrast between the two is what really
bit more
elevates the song.
Optimistic.
Yeah. The chorus is once again a direct quote from his wife. You can try the best you can. You can try the best you can. The best you can is good enough. This is a very optimistic idea. Yeah. It's saying, with the transition between that and lyrics, it comes off as very half-hearted to me almost. Like it's like he's saying it to himself, trying to convince himself.
I was thinking like he's saying it to somebody else, but like he doesn't really believe in it himself.
Yeah, that is another idea that like works for the same concept. But this track is really great. It's it is kind of the only track where you get that like rock goodness that comes from the Radiohead, which I enjoy. But this album is so different in a very unique way that like it does its own thing. And this track is sort of returns to their roots without seeming prototypical or like they are repeating it themselves. It has some of that old flavor, but it does its own thing.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But yeah, the lyrics are great. This is the most lyrical track. The rest are more atmospheric. using the lyrics as window dressing, whereas with this one, they are definitely the main focus.
I feel like they're also a little less open for interpretation.
That is fair, yeah. They are more straightforward.
Because it's not like... I don't know how to put it. I guess they're more complex in the lyrics. I don't know how to put this.
I suppose.
In like other tracks, it's usually just like 1 to 3 words that have like could have a million different meanings. Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel with Optimistic, it's a little bit more clear what he's trying to say.
Right, because there are so many lines that you get more of an idea.
Yeah.
I get
that's what I was trying to say by complex, but I couldn't find a better way to say it.
We get a reference to the George Orwell book Animal Farm as the final lyric before the last chorus. Which sort of representing the book represents, which is the failure of capitalism. Within the context of this track, I think that's sort of saying that this system of consumerism is dehumanizing and terrible, but it seems like there's no other solution.
Huh. Alright.
A pretty complex idea to be explored, but this album is chock full of them. So,
yeah.
We get that final line, dinosaurs roaming the earth, which sends us off into In Limbo, another track that took a while to grow on me.
Out of all of them, this is probably one of my least favorites.
Okay, I get that.
I feel like, for the most part, it doesn't change up much.
Ooh, I don't know about that, but...
Okay, well, nearing the end, yes, it changes up. That does change, but for the most part, the main, I don't know, instrumental and vocals, they just feel just kind of basic. They don't feel like they change up much, don't feel unique.
Okay.
But the end part, I do like the end part. That is a really cool amalgamation of, like, voices.
Man.
That part is good.
Yeah.
But
okay.
It's not very long.
I get that. I like this track a lot, mainly because of that repeating instrumental. I think it's really solid, so I get why they play it more than once. And with that sort of repeating idea, it sort of brings out the lyrics more, which this is once again a more lyrical track. We got lines like, "I'm on your side, nowhere to hide, trap doors that open, I spiral down," which is very up for interpretation, but it's evocative. So it brings out that idea of being lost and confused in this very confusing instrumental. It feels like you're lost, like you don't know where to go.
Well, I mean, track is called In Limbo.
That is fair.
Which I guess that is a really good fit for the track name.
And then we get the chorus line, "You're living in a fantasy world," which is like pretty sad.
Yeah. Would you say that fits with everything in its right place? Because I feel like...
Possibly.
I don't know if those two would have relation, but...
They have a pretty dissimilar idea behind them. I can get that. Yeah, I love the melody in this track, both from the guitars and from Tom's vocals. I think they're both really pretty in a very disturbing way. Does that make sense? Like there's something inhuman about them, almost.
The lyrics or the vocal?
The melody is very like off-putting again.
I would say that the lyrics, specifically the "you're living in a fantasy" part, is kind of just, especially how he says it, just like stone cold, bleak.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of how you said it, human.
Yeah. We get some samples of the radio recordings of chips that like play over each other as this track comes to close in the best part, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Where Tom just starts like letting his vocals rip, and you get that build of all of them together, which sounds like a monster arising out of the sea.
That's an interesting way to put it. Huh.
But it does leave. It says its goodbyes into our next track, Idioteque. I honestly would have thought this would be your favorite because it is IDM.
I was gonna ask you, is this
Yes.
IDM? Because, all right, it's good. I agree. I like it. I would say also this has some of the most I guess clearly depressing lyrics, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
I get that.
Let me see. We're not scaremongering, this is really happening. We're not scaremongering, this is really happening. That is just straight depressing.
I do want to bring up a meme I found that I always think of with the song. This album came out in 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and the movie Ice Age came out in 2002. So the lyric in the second verse, Ice Age coming,
God.
is, oh my god, Tom predicted Ice Age. I just wanted to bring that up.
I just want Okay.
Okay, but yeah, with that second verse, I'd say the weird percussion sounds that play in the left ear during that verse are my favorite on the entire album. They're so great. They just make me want to dance until my head comes off.
I would say this is probably one of the only songs here, other than maybe no, this is probably one of the only songs that I could feel like you could dance to.
I have danced to the National Anthem.
That was gonna be my
Poorly,
second
sure,
pick.
but
I was about to say maybe National Anthem.
the National Anthem is great. Just running song, honestly. But yeah, this song is really great. Tom took inspiration from acts like Aphex Twin and the Square Pusher for this track.
Ooh.
Tom has expressed how much he loves Aphex Twin.
As he should.
And it shows, because this track takes inspiration from dance music while being distinctly electronic. Hence IDM as the label for this.
Alright.
But yeah, Tom's vocals are very frantic in the song.
Yeah.
He's running away from something. He just spits it all out as fast as
Actual
he can.
lyrics too.
Yeah.
This is really happening. Well, whatever that
Everything all
is,
the
that's
time.
probably what he's running from.
Yeah. And then, once again, we have one constant idea that the whole song revolves around. In this case, it is the percussion. We get that constant beats that keep going with some very high melodies that sort of build into each other, these long tones. And they're really great.
Yeah.
Tom's vocals, I should ask, how do you like Tom's voice?
I feel like at least if we're talking single track, I don't think it's that bad, but I feel like the entire album, it feels like it's kind of frantic.
Okay.
And I feel like that kind of gets boring after a bit. Not I'm God, I don't want to hear his voice anymore, but
Alright,
I feel
that's
like
fair.
there isn't much change.
His voice is very polarizing. I love it, and some people hate it, but it seems like you're somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I'm probably around the middle, probably a bit above.
Yeah, the lyrics here are apocalyptic, and that is reflected in the song's tone. You get that nice contrast with the bright melodies and the very dark tone. That really shines.
Yeah, that's a good, very big contrast.
The song had a video, but it never got released.
Do you know why?
I don't know. The song was a single, but I can't imagine it getting played on the radio.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of Radiohead could play it on
It's very different
the
from
radio.
the rest of the album. That is one thing I love about this album, is that every song is so different. You get so many different ideas.
Yeah.
The only time that's less true is with our next track, A Morning Bell.
I was gonna say that. This is the other track that I'm not a big fan of.
It is probably the weakest. I still like it. For some reason, I guess I should bring this up. The sessions for this album were so long that they actually made a second album just out of the songs that didn't make it onto this album. But that is Amnesiac, and this track was brought back for Amnesiac, and the Amnesiac version of this track sucks. I don't like it. This version is better, but it's still pretty far and away the worst track. It's still very good.
Yeah, I would agree.
It is just the worst.
It's just all odd.
Yeah, it's very odd. That is one of its strengths, in my opinion, but I get why that would be not your thing.
It's the vocals. It's just like, whenever I said that I felt like sometimes I got a bit repetitive of his voice.
Yeah.
It might be, I just didn't like the vocals on Morning Bell, and since that was just nearing the end, I just thought I was just getting bored of it. That's probably it.
Okay. I quite like his delivery towards the end of this song, honestly, where he is like talks very soft and like fast. It sounds like it's all under his breath. Not a really interesting tone for it. Like in Limbo, this track blends rock ideas with electronic elements, which works really well in my opinion. I get how it's like not for everyone, but Tom's delivery is very varied in this song. You get a lot of different ideas. The instrumental is good, probably the most forgettable, but still pretty dang good. So
not bad, yeah.
Especially around the middle, so when he says round and round and round and round and round, that sort of moment that the instrumental has to shine is like really good. It's just like really high reaching tones that dive right back down again for cut the kids in half, which is, a very shocking.
Yeah. Can lyrics be abrasive?
Yeah, sure. It's a reference to the Bible story of King Solomon, if you know it.
I've never read the Bible.
Nor have I, but I do know that.
All I know is they hate gays, and that's about it.
I'm gonna leave that in. You say. Right. Okay. But yeah, this is a really good song. Like, I get how it's like your least favorite because it is mine too, but it's good.
It's not like off.
Right. Our last and our final song, which I will explain. I actually own this album on vinyl, and
oh wait, no, I think I know this. I think I was looking at one of the comments. You can explain.
On the vinyl and on the CDs, the next track, a motion picture soundtrack, and the quote final track, Untitled, are one. The motion picture soundtrack plays, and there's 30 seconds of silence, and there's Untitled. So it's very together like that. The band was actually mad when they were put on streaming as two separate tracks, but they figured people wouldn't listen to 30 seconds of silence, so
yeah.
But yeah, this track is my favorite.
Huh. I would, it's a good track.
This song makes me cry every time I listen to it. Like every time.
I could honestly see that.
I have always seen this as like the last moments of life in this album, and then Untitled is like your ascending to heaven.
That's almost what I was gonna say.
Okay.
That is very close to what I was gonna say. It sounded like, to me at least, it sounds like the world is ending and you've just accepted it. Like, you're just like, there's nothing else I can do. World's ending. We're all dead.
That is shown mostly in the final lyric in the song, I will see you in the next life. It always makes me tear up.
And I didn't write it for Untitled, but I was thinking of like Afterlife whenever I was listening to Untitled.
Right. Because it has a very rising, almost like heavenly tone to it.
Yeah.
As the synths sort of twinkle away. But yeah, the lyrics to the motion picture soundtrack, which there aren't many of, are so beautifully sad. Like, red wine and sleeping pills, help me get back to your arms. Cheap sex and sad films, help me get where I belong. just this portrait of an unbelievably sad relationship
Yeah.
as like a metaphor for the end of the world. It's just so great. Sorry that I yelled. It's just like, God, I'm like
fine.
tearing up now. Just like reading that. Yeah, the instrumental is just. You have that first section for the first verse and the first chorus, which is these long organ tones that you can like reflect on your life over, and then it all stops and it switches to this beautiful soundscape of these constantly changing electronics just going back and forth over everything, and it's like standing in a waterfall. It's just everything is happening all at once, and it's just so great. And then Tom says it's not like in the movies. He's speaking of like life as a whole, I feel.
And especially the next line, they fed us on little white lies.
You know, saying nothing is what it seems. It's all sort of saying that life is not a happy experience. It's one of death, as is now going to happen. You know, the life exists to die in. That is like the tone of the song, and you can see how that interpretation could make me cry. Like,
yeah, is this the one song that you said that you didn't want to listen to?
Yeah, that is why.
Yeah, okay, I understand that.
I love it, but
I don't want to cry every day.
Yeah, it's really hard listening, which is not something I want to do that often. But yeah, it is just a beautiful track. Probably my favorite Radiohead song, period, which because the Radiohead are one of my favorite bands, that means it's one of my favorite songs ever. So great.
Yeah, I agree.
I love it. And then with Untitled taking us into the place where we can be happy forever, sort of the opposite of the rest of this album. It is no surprise that my co-host called this depressing, but it has a weird sort of happiness in finality to me that makes this a wonderful closer.
Yeah, I would agree. Amazing closer.
What do you think of the album as a whole? If you have any final thoughts?
Great album. This is not something that would go on my playlist.
Right.
Because very depressing, but definitely enjoyable. Very good. I actually have one question. What is the album cover? It looks like it's like a bunch of like snow-covered trees, and then they're like all on fire in the back.
I believe it's some mountains.
Alright.
But towards the bottom, they get kind of distorted. Where would you place this in your ranking?
Kind of hard, but I would probably say I think I put it in the middle.
Okay. So
Below Loveless, but above Aeroplane.
Okay.
Hey, Vi here. A few days after we recorded this, Corgo changed his vote to put Kid A on top. Any of us can change our picks before the episode is edited and published. Thanks.
And for you?
I would put it on top, because as I said before...
Yeah, I was kind of gonna guess that. Don't think I needed to ask that, but it's good for clarification.
Right. So that was the third episode of I and Corgo talk about Bucor. Kind of a heavier episode, but it is fitting of the album we are discussing.
Out of all the ones that we have left, how high does this rank on the depressing list, I guess?
In my opinion, it's probably the most, but there are a few more you might find more depressing, but out of the ones I've listened to, because I haven't heard them all. Yeah, people who use Mew are probably pretty depressed, so it makes sense that they would gravitate to albums like this. But I can relate to it too, and I don't know. There's this like stereotype that people who listen to sad albums are just like wallowing in their sadness, and I wouldn't agree at all. Like seeing your emotions just reflected in the art you're listening to is very important.
Oh, I honestly don't care what you listen to. I mean, if you listen to harsh noise, I'm gonna make fun of you, but listening to sad stuff, that's not something I do.
Okay, that is like fair.
Because I feel like as you said, if it kind of relates to your mood, then well, I don't want to listen to things that are sad if it relates to your mood. I guess if that makes sense.
I can feel that.
Essentially, yeah, most of the stuff I have here is like super upbeat because there is quite a bit of hardcore on here.
You have your playlist, you mean?
Uh-huh.
What is the name of this the playlist, by the way?
The Woot Zone.
The Woot Zone is the
The
highest echelon of musical quality one can.
Have you seen it?
I have.
Never sent you it.
You have the Blood Hill on here? Unless you didn't like sad music.
If you tune out the lyrics, then it isn't sad.
I guess. Alright. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll be back again soon.
Uh-huh. With what album's next? I'm not gonna say
Talking
it.
about a very famous new chorale. Well, one of the most.
Oh.
That's why I did it pretty early.
I've never seen this album in my life.
I have not listened to it either. So for the first time, we are both going in blind.
All right.
So look forward to that. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Goodbye.